It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew version 1.0 decklist to the commander in front of us on my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, as well as I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff. The Discord link's in the description below, and it's been popping lately. I'd love for you to come join. But as we move along Abzan week, it was probably only right that we eventually hit a counters deck. Truthfully, I tried my best to not make this week all about counters, because it's going to be pretty easy to do with how many popular counters commanders there are. But I think the new Felothar is actually really interesting. I think it plays a cool style of counters, and I wanted to kind of take my stab at it. I think it's a fun and interesting deck. Felothar, Dawn of the Abzan, is a 3-mana 3/3 with trample. It says whenever it enters or attacks, we can sacrifice a non-land permanent. When we do, we put a counter on each creature we control. I think the fun thing about this version of Felothar is I try to kind of make this a tokens attacky style counters deck. So kind of what you'd expect from the Zergo Mardu style lists that we have coming out. Tokens on attack, lots of value. But I think the cool part about Felothar is we get to do it on attack, and if we do it just like we did with Zergo, where we stacked our triggers so we get the maximum value, we actually can get a counter on all these tokens that have come in that turn. Tokens also make perfect fodder for that sacrifice that we might need. We're still going to play a lot of classic counter stuff, a lot of counters matter stuff, but I think the tokens could be a nice follow-through on us on getting a lot of ways to go wide as well as going tall. I want to give a quick thank you to the channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in seeing all of our videos early for just $1 a month, check it out in the description below. But there's a lot of ways to make tokens, and in our colors, a lot of it's going to be based in white. But we do have a lot of interesting options. Of course, Adeline's probably one of our best, right? Making 3 humans whenever we attack. It doesn't even need to attack to get them. Making sure we have those tokens there. Enoch Strike Later, that new one from the new set, again, feels great, allowing us to get a goblin, whether it or our commander are attacking. And again, we want Felothar attacking because it's going to become a nice threat, and then can sacrifice itself to give all of our tokens indestructible. Avenger of Zendikar, a classic, right? Mono green token maker comes in and makes a plant for each land we control, and then whenever another land comes in, we just put a counter on all of our plants. This is especially good because Felothar is going to be putting counters on them as well, so those plants are going to get pretty big fairly quickly. Basking Broodskill, and we're going to have a couple creatures we're going to talk about like it, where whenever a counter is put on it, we get to make a token. This is really nice, because then at minimum, even if we had just the Broodskill, right, we'd be able to fulfill Felothar's thing every time it attacks. Elenda is a really interesting case in our deck. Whenever another creature dies, you put a counter on Elenda, and whenever Elenda dies, you make X 1/1 vampires with lifelink, where X is her power. Elenda is really great, right, because we can grow it and then sacrifice it to Felothar to get a bunch of the those 1/1s. The only downside to that is that I believe the way the triggers are going to work, that those 1/1s wouldn't get the counter from sacrificing Elenda. But the important part is you turn Elenda into a bunch of life-linking vampires that then can get counters and grow. Jackrabbit, when it attacks, makes rabbits equal to its power. You can have it come in with some counters on it, or it's just going to get counters from Felothar, making us more rabbits. And we could even take these tokens, right, and use them for something else, and mana-wise, or Convoke, or all these other things. Scurry Oak, very similar to Basking Broodskill, allowing us to make some squirrels whenever our counter's put on it. Sinkhole Surveyor is a very interesting new card. Whenever it attacks, we lose a life and it endures 1, so you can either put a counter on it or make a 1/1 spirit. So again, here's a way to get a counter token every turn. Same thing with something like Voice of Victory, making those 2 warriors with Mobilize, and they go away at the end of the turn, so almost perfect, right, for Felothar's ability to be able to use for that. March of the Multitudes lets us convoke all of those tokens we have to make a bunch of 1/1 soldiers with lifelink. And again, this go-wide tokens plan can be really fun for all of our Alpha Strike tar cards to really take over a board state, right? Carrot Cake is an example of an artifact that I think could be really beneficial in our deck. So when it comes in, and when you sacrifice it, you make a rabbit and you scry 1. So we can actually have the Carrot Cake come in, make us that rabbit, sack the Carrot Cake to Felothar, and it'll make us another rabbit, right? And then we had a permanent, right, that we could sacrifice. Dollmaker Shop's going to make us some toy tokens whenever we attack, but the The key upside to Porcelain or to Dollmaker Shop is Porcelain Gallery. Whenever we have that 6 mana, we can turn it on, turn all of our creatures into base power and toughness XX, where X is the number of creatures we control. Again, I'm going to work really well with counters, right? Because then the counters are just going to make them even bigger. Dreadhorde Invasion is going to get us a zombie. If we don't have an army, we make a new one. That's a 1/1 every turn. So this is kind of fun because we could basically use that every turn. Otherwise, we could let the zombie grow, and once it gets to 6 power, it gets to have lifelink, which is pretty cool. Revival of the Ancestors, that new saga, works really well here, making us 3 spirits on the first one. The second one distributes some counter, and on that third one, if we can time it right, gives our whole board trample and lifelink for a big life gain turn and a big trample turn. And then Skrell's Hive making us that might every turn. Again, I like that the might can then be there for Felothar to use. Otherwise, you get a little army of mites going, and then the mites get counters right as Felothar builds them up. And that Toxic may eventually become something that we can utilize. But I think where we're going to kind of accelerate is finding a way to get counters on all of our creatures. Drana has a flyer with First Strike, and whenever it hits, all your other attacking creatures get a counter on them. Again, really useful that Drana can hit first and grow our creatures a little bit. Mazarek, just whenever a player sacrifices any permanent, we put a counter on each creature we control. Again, going to really help our our tokens get big, right? As we sacrifice these things for Felothar to basically get, if you think about it, 2 counters a turn with Mazarek and Felothar down. Mikaeus has a really nice fun loop with anything that can put a counter on it each turn. Tap to remove a counter from it to put a counter on every other creature we control, right? And then Felothar hopefully can put one back on Mikaeus, meaning that we can always, right, have a spare counter on it to, tap and put counters on all of our creatures. Rosie Cotton has a fun ability. Whenever we make a token, we get to put a counter on a creature other than Rosie, so this can create some fun loops with things like Scurry Oak and Basking Brood-Scale to make a ton of tokens, but this also can just help grow our other creatures as we're making our tokens. Fangs of Colonia can put a counter on a creature we control and then double the number of counters on it. For 6 mana, we can do that for every creature we control, just allowing them to get really big. Virtual Loyalty puts counter on each creature we control and then untaps them at the beginning of our end step. This is nice because it's going to give them basically vigilance, but growing them every turn, including with all these other ways we have to give them counters. There's so many white enchantments, so many ways in white to give out these counters that we're going to really be able to take advantage of. But we want to take advantage of the counters actually being on creatures. And that's where we can use things like Abzan Battle Priest and Falconer that give each creature with a counter on them certain abilities. Lifelink from the Battle Priest, flying from the Falconer. Bulwark Ox can sacrifice itself to give all of our creatures with counters on them hexproof and indestructible, a good way to protect our board against most of the board wipes we're going to see, including single target removal. If somebody's trying to remove Felothar or one of our key creatures as a counter on it, I think we don't mind giving up the Ox to protect it from that if it means keeping our strategy going forward. Envoy the Ancestor gives all of our creatures with a counter on them lifelink. Champion of Lambholt says that creatures with power less than it can't block creatures we control, maybe effectively leading most of the time to our creatures being unblockable. Felissa says whenever a non-token creature we control dies, if it had counters on it, we make a bunch of inklings where X is the number of counters on it. A nice way to get value from our creatures dying, especially remember, if we wanted to sacrifice a creature to Felothar with Felissa out, we would get all those inklings right for that in the process. Kutzil not only shuts down opponents casting spells on our turn, but anytime one or more creatures that have power greater than their base power would hit a player, we can draw a card. Again, going to be easy with the counters and allow us to get some card draw. Tuskguard Captain gives all of our creatures with counters on them trample. And then the new Yalthan Tomb Guard says whenever a creature we control with a counter on it deals combat damage to a player, we just draw a card and lose a life. So we can just draw cards that way, filling our hand with things. I love the look of the new Synchronized Charge, putting 2 counters among up to 1 or 2 target creatures, then just giving all of our creatures with counters on them, Vigilance and Trample. Trample being key, right, so they can hit through for big damage. And then Innkeeper's Talent, we've been seeing in a lot of Counters Matters decks since Bloomburrow, just allowing you to put a counter on a creature every combat. Getting that Ward 1 for your permanents with counters on them is really big, and then that level 3 turns into that branching evolution, doubling style type ability to double up the amount of counters you're putting on your things. Truthfully, I think the deck's got a lot of fun to it. Make the tokens, grow your board. You have all the protection spells in white. You have access to a lot of really great removal. We've got all the Golgari removal. You've got all that white classic Swords, Plowshares, Path to Exile removal. But as I said before on the show, and I'll say it again, no deck's ever complete. And going into testing, I think I'd want to see 2 things. Do I have enough ways to punch through for game? Like, are we? I know we can go wide, but can we do it effectively? Do we need something like Overwhelming Stampede or Triumph for the Hordes? You know, we have a couple of these abilities. Do we need more of them? Do we need to guarantee we can get more of that through? If so, you know, we have things like Overwhelming Stampede, Overrun, Triumph for the Hordes. We can bring some of those in order to take advantage of that. Of course, you have something like Classic in the Cathar's Crusade, an enchantment that puts a counter on each of our creatures whenever a creature comes in. I think Cathar's Crusade makes a ton of sense. I know it has a mixed emotion from some people, but it probably makes sense in the deck. I just honestly got to the point where I wasn't sure what to cut for it. But I think in testing, it would be one of those cards that would show us, you know, how we can effectively punch through harder, right? Especially as we're making tokens in combat. And then Herd Bailiff is just another copy of this Basking Brood Scale Scurry Oak type ability, except it makes 4/4 beasts instead of 0/1 spawns or 0/1 spawns or 1/1 squirrels. So I like Herd Bailiff a little better because those 4/4 beasts are a little bit stronger. But I kind of wanted to see, how does this making tokens in combat and putting counters on them, how does that strategy work before we go towards, you know, more of these type of abilities. But there are a lot more abilities of creatures that care about when counters get put on them. We are playing a few of them, you know, but there are some more we could find. But we love to do one in the most of the channel and get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtest on our channel is not to find Magical Christmas Land. It's not to determine our best plays, but it's to get in some game scenarios and kind of help figure out how we set this thing on up. Here we're keeping a 4-lander with Anguish on making for some removal. There's Skrell's Hive to get the party going, and Abzan Falconer for the flying. So not a bad start. We see something that can get us things to sacrifice, something to pay off the counters, and there you go. There's a Conclave Mentor, which is going to double the amount of counters that are put on things. At least at the moment, I think I have to go for the Swamp for the Skrell's Hive is my thought. Now, if my opponents have a white source, we just, you know, go with the Exotic Orchard. But we'll go with this for now because I think Skrell's is my best play here on turn 2. Yes, we lose the life on this turn, but we get the mites, right? We get that process going. Here for 3 mana, I really like Champion of Lambhole to get that process started, right? It's going to start getting things, but I'm probably a green source off at the moment of that. So I think we'll just get the Falconer in. Well, actually, no, right here I would have Felothar. And I guess I could sack this Mite to get a counter on it if I want to do that. Right, that might, I guess, make some sense because then this turn, we're getting the Mite. Oh, that comes in tap, though. So if our opponent has a green source, it's just the Exotic Orchard, right? I guess we could Fable Passage for a green. I guess I probably could have found a better way to maneuver, right, that line. But I think we just get the Falconer in, put Felothar in the air, sack the Mite to Felothar when it attacks to put a counter on both of these guys. So Felothar's still in the air, rocking and rolling. Or next turn. There, I can Lambhole. Can I Lambhole plus Mentor? I can't. I don't have the mana. If I go Fable Passage for a green source, can I? Yes. Green, something. White, yeah. So if I Fable Passage here for a forest, I'll be able to get a Conclave Mentor, and that's going to put a counter here. Actually, it'd be 2 counters, right? Because of Conclave Mentor. And then go to combat Felothar attacks, get rid of the Mite. Each of our creatures get 2 counters instead of 1 because of Conclave Mentor. Now, even though these guys are in the air, it's going to be harder to block them, right? Because of the Champion Lamo. And now we're in good shape. Again, we'd love to get to a turn where the Mites can start attacking and being a threat. We don't mind just continuing to get pieces in. Get Akaneka How in, so now whenever it attacks, it can start growing our creatures from more. Again, Coda Combat, put counters. And I mean, we didn't get to see a lot of the really top tier token producers in combat, but we're basically getting there. I mean, now our opponents really have to deal with the Lambhole, right? Because it's just going to keep getting these guys in the air. We have some removal to back up at some point, but again, I like this playtest, although it's not super flashy. I think it shows what the deck's trying to do. And remember, we are bracket 3, so that is kind of what we are expecting, right, from our deck. Let's get into playtest number 2. Keeping a 4-lander again, Warden of the Grove. Pretty fun creature on our end step. It gets a counter on it, and then whenever another non-token creature comes in, it endures X. So either X counters on it or makes an XX Spirit. There's the Invasion and the Carrot Cake. So we got a couple interesting options. I guess we'll play the Sunpetal Grove in tap just to switch our options. Okay, well there's Adeline. I mean, both Adeline and Warden of the Grove are great turn 3 options. I think I'll play the Dread Horde. So start of this turn, we get a zombie army with 1 on it. I almost want to get Warden in first before I get Felothar in, just so then it can start giving all of our other creatures counters when they come in. Because then as we come into turn 4, that army grows a little bit. Now I'm thinking, well, we don't even... Do we do Felothar now? If I do Adeline now and attack, I'm still getting the option of some humans this turn when I attack. I can do Adeline and still hold up swords. Same thing, I can do Felothar and still hold up hordes. Right now, it would just be Felothar and Warden of the Grove getting the counters. But I mean, Adeline, I think, right, it could still come in next turn, right, and get value, right. Oh, sorry. So when Felothar comes in, this is from Felothar's ability for sacrificing. I think it would actually make more sense to make of the spirit, right? Just so we have an extra, and we'll give it a 1, right? And then Felothar would put a counter on everything, right? Because there was 1 counter on the Grove, and then this clicks up to 3. So now Adeline's going to actually come in with a nice chance of either counters or a big. So Adeline comes in. I can either make a 3/3 spirit or give it the counters. I kind of like making the spirit because again, we can get the counters on it this turn with Felothar, right? And then I'd probably just do the carrot cake here. I'm sorry, I missed the zombie as well this turn. Do the carrot cake, make the rabbit, right? So now we have a chance of growing our board here. I think with the spirits, this spirit setup here, we don't really need to get rid of this army. We can just let it grow and start have it getting lifelink. Go to combat. I think I would just sack the carrot cake. That would give me another rabbit, but I think that rabbit's not going to get the token, right? Because it's not going to go off until after I put a counter on everything. But that's okay. Now we attack, right, with Adeline, make a couple humans. We're, these spirits can attack this turn. These guys can attack. We're getting nice attacks in, right, this turn. Now we go up again. Felissa just to hedge our bets on our creatures dying. I think I probably just take the 4/4 spirit, right? Grow it a little bit. Again, it can start growing, right? And then now, Felissa, we can go for I guess, like a white source on this. It doesn't really particularly matter. We just basically want to leave that swords up. Go to combat. I think I'd just sack one of the rabbits, right? Get a counter on everything. Again, we're not tracking the humans I made last turn, whether they died or not in combat. And this is a little bit more what I want this to look like. You've got these nice mixed tokens. We're getting into combat. We're making combat a problem for our opponents. I guess we could have done the Valkyrie's Call instead just to protect our board, but it's good to see sometimes how that engine is going to move so that you can make right decisions in better games on when to deploy right protection and when to deploy what you need. Let's get into playtest number 3. Keeping a 3-lander with Nature's Lord for some ramp. There's the Invasion again, Alenda and Mazarek this time. So Mazarek is a card I really like the look of, right? Because it is going to allow us to really get some value. Here, if I go Dreadhorde Invasion, I guess I could Felothar next turn. If I Nature's Lore, I'm Felotharing and leaving a man on the table. So I think I Dreadhorde. Take the Ari. Right. I can either Felothar again or Nature's Lore. I think I'll Felothar, and I don't really need to get rid of the army. I mean, it's just a counter on Felothar at this point. Now in turn 4, I kind of like Alenda. This one up to 2. And I'm thinking attack, get rid of the army. So you get 1 on both of them and 1 on Alenda, right? Because a creature died. And Alenda can't attack, but now we're setting up Alenda for a future turn there, right? Here on 5, I think the answer's... Sorry, we got another army, right? That army is going to keep being made every upkeep. We don't mind losing the life because now we have some ways to gain life. I think it's Mazarek, right? Sack the zombie army to Felothar. So Elenda gets a counter, Mazarek gives them a counter, and then Felothar gives them a counter, right? So now our board's really starting to grow. Attack with Felothar and Elenda this turn, right? Continuing to get that value in turn over turn. This turn, we actually can start keeping this army, right? Because now we have Anok Strike Leader, which is also going to protect those... we'll get the Skrul's Hive going, I guess, as well. The nice part now is if I attack with these 3, Anok goes off making me those 3 goblins, right? And now I can just sack one of the goblins to Felothar. I don't have to sack the zombie army because now I kind of want to get it to grow. So again, Elenda gets 1. Mazarek gives them all 1. Felothar gives them all 1. So now, right, these goblins that just came in from that Anok's attack trigger are even getting bigger, and now you could start to see where this is just going to get really good for us turn over turn if nobody stops this. Next turn, we'll probably just take the Skrul's Hive token that came in. We get 2 more goblins with the Strike Leader, and again, we're just singing now. The only thing we didn't see was protection, but, you know, you're not going to see it every game. But truthfully, like, even if they wipe the board, we're getting 9 1/1s from Elenda. We just dump Felothar back in, sacrifice one of them, put the counters. You know, it's a really nice spot for us that way. Let's go one more playtest here. Keep it a 4-lander with the Battle Priest. There's some protection in the Flawless Maneuver and Scurry Oak. So Scurry Oak can give us a way, right, to get some counters in. I think we get the Sun Petal Grove in just so that Swamp in next turn can get us Adeline, right? Then coming in this turn... Original thought was Felothar, but I'd have to do it after combat, right, to get advantage of those 1/1s. Attack with Adeline, make the 1/1s. Because then my thought is if any of them survive, we just play Felothar, sack the one that survived, right, and put 2 counters, and put a counter on each of these guys here. I don't expect those humans to live the combat. If the humans don't live the combat, then we just play Felothar and don't get the counters. But we'll just assume for the sake of this that we could. Now here in 5-man, I really like the Scurry Oak, but this giving me lifelink is absolutely huge. Because now I can attack, make the humans, right? Felothar sacks one of the humans, and this is still on attack, right? Giving everybody a counter. Now these have lifelink. These guys have even higher lifelinks, right? Because of Battle Priest. And now this is a really nice combat for us. And as we lead into this next turn, I think it's probably just the loyalty, right? Getting the counters on all our creatures and untapping them. Again, go to combat, 3 more humans, 1 of them to Felothar, counter on each of them, right? More lifelink, and then on our end step, another counter from the Virtue, and now we're just really vibing, right? We got the Flawless Maneuver for some protection. They're all lifelinking now, so all of these tokens are lifelinking, and I think we just got a decent amount of value here for the board. We've got at least 1 piece of protection, and we can go from there. But I'd love to know, what do you think of Felothar down in the comment section below? Again, I like this idea, counters plus tokens. It feels like my vibe, you know, sacrifice, you know, prop the board up, things like, you know, things like Mazarek and, you know, and Adeline and Anok making those tokens. But I'd love to know what you think. Do you think this style of a deck would work? And I would love to hear what you think down in the comment section below. I'll see y'all next time.